When we're working on healing our pelvic floor and core, we ultimately want to have the diaphragm and pelvic floor working together with every breath. And for that to happen, we want those two distinct entities to be stacked on top of one another. And one of the ways we go about doing this as we move into exercise is by finding our hamstrings and abs. And I want you to imagine that if I was in a very exaggerated forward tilt position, imagine a string or a vector of an arrow coming up from my pelvis, and then another string that's pulling down. If I activate my abdominals and my hamstrings together, I can help to pull my pelvis into a more optimal neutral position underneath the rib cage so that every breath works with the pelvic floor. And so this is a concept that we're going to explore in beginner movements, and then you're going to ultimately want to bring into other training as your body starts to learn and adapt to finding your hamstrings and abs. Now, you might also find this beneficial if you are somebody who feels like your hamstrings are constantly tight, and no matter how much stretching you do, you don't feel improvement. And it could be for the very reason that your hamstrings are overstretched and they need to be activated instead. Following through with these exercises might provide just the relief that you're looking for. So I will meet you on my mat, and we're going to get into some movement to explore this concept of finding hamstrings and abs. All right, let's get started finding our hamstrings and abs. The only equipment you need are maybe 2 towel rolls for some neck support for breathing, and either a Pilates ball, small child's ball, a pillow would work as well, and a wall. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna spin around and we are going to place our feet on the wall. We are looking to have 90 degrees from ankle, knee, and hip. Now with these towel rolls, you can have one placed right underneath the base of the skull so that you can keep a nice curve through the neck. So we don't want to crunch and close off our airway. You could also have one underneath the crown of your head if that helps you feel supported as well. So we don't want our breathing to be so forced and difficult to find. Now we're gonna take that ball, pillow, or towel roll, place it between the legs. So this is a 90-90. This is from Postural Restoration, and it's one of my favorite beginning movements that helps connect the pelvis and the rib cage together, which means we're then connecting the diaphragm and pelvic floor. And this helps to engage both the hamstrings and abs at the same time. So let's walk through this. With your feet on the wall, I want you to feel the knuckle of your big toe, your baby toe, and your heel. And imagine those make a triangle together that we call our tripod foot. So we want to spread our toes wide, put our feet on the wall. Now we're not pushing into the wall, we're sensing where we are in space. And essentially, if I flipped you upside down into a standing position, this would be mimicking a squat. So what we're doing is we're laying the groundwork to take this concept into higher level movement, but it starts here. So with those feet on the wall, what I want you to do is imagine that you were gonna drag those heels down the wall, but you're gonna do it isometrically, so they're not going to move. So as you drag, we want to activate our proximal hamstring right here at the bottom of the pelvis, just like that string I was asking you to imagine, to help pull the pelvis back more posteriorly, or what is working towards a more neutral position in line with the rib cage. So if I was laying here and I was flared up through the ribs, my pelvis was tilting forward, I start to drag through my hamstrings, and those hamstrings are gonna bring the pelvis back. So we want the glutes to stay relaxed. We're not clenching the glutes at all. It is the heel drag activating the hamstrings to bring the pelvis more posterior. So work on finding that drag. If you have a hard time against the wall, you could always put a ottoman against the wall that you could still sense the feet and then drag your heels down into. So set up again. If you are still feeling through this, we want those proximal hamstrings to bring that pelvis just slightly posterior. And then we're gonna start to gently squeeze this ball, and the ball is going to turn on our inner thighs, which will also help connect to our core. Now take an inhale here, let the ribs expand, and then exhale, keep the ribs wide, let the air flow out as you zip from the bottom of the pelvic floor and core. So what we are doing is we're going to hold this static position now. Hamstrings are on. We're gently squeezing the ball. You should feel at the end of your exhale even more core activation because we have the deep core muscles turned on by our exhale. Now, our next breath, you're going to keep this ab tension. I don't want you to let your ribs recoil up. Instead, your inhale is going to move into the lateral and back of your rib cage. So you should feel more pressure into your back from the ground as that breath moves. Take an inhale. Exhale. Feel the core tension turn on. You can add a soft reach through the hands. You just don't want to reach so much that you crunch the sternum. So just a soft reach so that that shoulder blade hugs the rib cage. And then inhale again, breathe into the sides and the back of the rib cage. Keeping the abs turned on. The ab tension funnels the pressure not to the front of the belly, but instead into the rib cage, up and off of the pelvic floor. 2 more breaths just like this. So we've got our hamstrings in position. The abs are on with our exhale. Our next inhale goes into the ribs and the back. One more. Good. Lower your hips down, shake it out for a moment. We're going to pop back up. And then we're going to explore some gentle pelvic tilts. So a pelvis can move anterior and posterior, and we need a pelvis to move anterior and posterior in something like walking. Now, every single step of walking requires the pelvis to move in and out of internal and external rotation, and each of those movements has a forward and posterior movement associated with it. So when we talk about that, what we want to talk about is how do we keep our hamstrings on and sense our ability to move our pelvis anterior and posterior. So I want you to set up again with the feet in position, drag through the heels, find those hamstrings, and then exhale, turn your core on. When you breathe in, you're going to move breath into the lateral and back side, and exhale. Now play around with letting your pelvis come forward. Inhale. Exhale. Keep the hamstrings on. And you move your pelvis posteriorly more. So we think about tuck and untuck. Now we are tucked a little bit more. We're posterior. Take a full inhale. And stay for the exhale. Go ahead and come forward. Untuck. Take a full inhale, and I want you to see if you sense pressure flowing more to the posterior pelvic floor. And exhale. You might feel more posterior pelvic floor lifting. What if we come into a tuck again? Take an inhale. You feel more pressure going forward to the anterior. Exhale. Let's do 2 more. Just staying and starting to learn in your body. Can you feel this connection of keeping muscle activation at the hamstrings? Glutes are relaxed, they're not clenching or squeezing, while we find this movement at the pelvis of tuck and untuck. All right, go ahead and take your feet off, and then we're gonna spin around, we're gonna come onto our back. Now on our back, we're gonna use the same setup options if you like for your head and neck. And what we're just gonna do is we're gonna explore with our general hook lying position, how do we feel our hamstrings and abs? So all you need again is your ball. So we've got our head and neck support. Again, if I didn't have this, or perhaps if you feel like you're tucked like this, we want to keep the airway open so that breathing's a little bit easier while we work on all of these other concepts. So feet are on the ground. And what I want you to do is imagine if I lifted my toes and I dragged through my heels, we're doing the same thing we were doing on the wall. So we're creating an isometric drag of the hamstrings to get hamstrings pulling pelvis into a nice position where we are stacked with the rib cage and the diaphragm. So take an inhale here. And then I want you to exhale, start to drag through the heels as if you were dragging your heel toward your bottom, but the glutes stay relaxed. So if you need to, bring your hands to your cheeks, check in, shake them around, make sure they're staying loose as we drag from the proximal hamstring. Now, if you cannot do this with your feet flat, you can try just digging, but we are losing the contact of the feet into the floor, so it's important to find it with that. Now imagine you could bring this into some basic core exercises as you're learning to create this stacked environment. Now, gentle squeeze helps ascend the pelvic floor, turn the core on, and we're gonna take 5 breaths just like this. Now, you can have your hands to your ribs and belly so that you can get some feedback that you are breathing and expanding, or you can do a gentle reach again, not crunching, but just a soft reach so we can get some more posterior expansion. So hamstrings and abs are on. Inhale. Exhale, squeeze the ball a little bit more. Now the rib cage has come down and back and the pelvis is in line. On your next inhale, breathe laterally and into the ground. Breathe from the bottom up. Hamstrings on, inhale again. Exhale. One more. Okay, come on up. We're gonna switch it around. We're gonna explore finding hamstrings and abs on our hands and knees. This is where you need your wall again. So you can use your feet on the wall, and you can just imagine that we don't need to have the whole sole of our foot flat, but just your toes. And my toes now can drag up isometrically to find the hamstrings a little bit more. So wrists under shoulders, knees under hips. It's a bear position. As you set up, you can start to drag through the toes, so just the balls of the feet, to help that pelvis position turn on. So imagine if I was not active at all and I was just sinking in my position, I start to press away, so I get my ribs to hug my scapula, and then I can drag through those toes to help my pelvis position. So again, we now have hamstrings and abs working together. So let's breathe here. A little bit more challenging when we don't have the assist of the ball. But now here, I want you to think about not letting the belly drop like that. But if we hold our core tension on, we send breath to our back body. So think about breathing into the bra band, breathing into your shoulders. Breathe in again. Feeling pelvis position. One more. Now what we're going to do is we're going to explore some pelvic tilt on hands and knees as well. So you can drag through those toes, find the hamstrings, keep the hamstrings on, and then notice what it feels like to spill slightly forward and back. So we think about untuck, and tuck. Now the pressure flow is the same. When I go very anterior, you're gonna feel your posterior opening. When I tuck, there's more anterior. Now we don't want to be overly rounded and overly extended. We can have variable movement at the pelvis that still allows to feel pelvic floor length. So you can play with your pelvic tilt on those hands and knees as well, focusing on maintaining the hamstrings and the ab connection as you're working through those. So those are 3 of my favorite basic but very important foundational movements to start to learn connecting your hamstrings and your abs together so that you can feel that connection and bring that forward into your movement.